Please welcome Martyn Ware.
Am I on? Yes, you can hear me. Thank you all for coming, and I'm very flattered by the lead-in there. It's actually, that's half of my speech already there. It's gone. Right, so this is me, and these are the two companies that I'm going to talk about today that I co-own. Sonic ID is a sound branding company, and Illustrious is my company that creates three-dimensional sound installations around the world for commercial and artistic reasons. And I'm going to try and justify including both of these things in the same pot by saying that we should not just think about bottom line all the time and short-term gain, although that's quite handy. We need to think about how sound can be used in more interesting and kind of physical world applications as well, not just in all the touch points that we normally have. So I'm just going to give you a bit of context and start it in a light way, which might make you laugh or not. That's me at the top when I was much younger, 30 years ago. And I have a company called British Electric Foundation, which is my production arm. ABC2011, you may have heard of Temptation. How many people know Temptation? I shouldn't ask this question. A couple of people, right. I'm not going to sing it, you'll be glad to hear. Sonic ID and Illustrious, and this is the logo for Future of Sound, which is my touring show where I show off sound, how it's used in various applications with different disciplines. Because I got so sick of doing demos of three-dimensional sound for people 2 and 3 at a time. I thought, if I keep on like this, I'm going to be 90 before I get a job out of it. So I decided to start installing three-dimensional sound works in big theatres and asking other people from different disciplines to create works and imagine how they may use sound in the future. So trying to be a bit more proactive, really. So this is me in 1978. Yes, beards have come back in since then. With the Human League. Okay. And I'm only playing this so you can hear my name being spoken by Tina Turner.
Call 2 of my producers, ABC2011, Martyn and Glenn,
love that,
to assist me on my new single.
Good work, guys.
I also did Trencher and Darby's first album, just to show that I can actually sell records, and we can bring this into the sound branding field. We are still working, it's ABC2011, we're touring at the moment, and 30th anniversary last year. And just to show that we're not just a bunch of old farts, we actually do work with the young artists as well, like LaRue, collaborations at Festival last year. Anyway, on to the serious stuff now. I was going to briefly try and assess where we are now with sound branding, but I think people in the rest of the day are going to do that stuff. I think we all know it's a growing, but it's having some teething difficulties as a field because of the nature of the economic situation we find ourselves in. So I'm going to let other people go into detail about that. I think we all know where we are. Sonic ID is our sound branding agency. Illustrious is our real-world application agency. One of the points I want to try and get across is in my view, sonic branding doesn't have to be about bottom line and immediate gain all the time. I know it's difficult talking to clients and trying to convince them of that fact, but I think we need to stick to our guns and actually let people know that we value sound branding and sound as part of their overall plan, and that they should incorporate it from the outset in their planning. If we undervalue it and constantly try to justify using sound in some kind of defensive way, then people will not get it. This is my experience. And I won't go into all the negative experiences I've had with companies, because I think we want to start off with a positive aspect today, but there are a lot of problems to get over in terms of perception of sound branding. So I would argue that we've got to put design back at the heart of branding and sound. But just let's talk about the pitfalls to start off with. How many times have we all dealt with marketing executives who said, I really understand sound branding, I really want an integrated suite of applications for all my touch points with the public, and and can you tell me how much it's going to cost? And as soon as you tell them how much it's going to cost, suddenly the phone calls start drying up. I had one company, who I will name actually, Hasbro. Is there any Hasbro representatives in the audience? All right. Nice people. They came to us, they said they wanted to rebrand Monopoly using sound branding as a central platform of what they were doing. We spent 3 months talking to them, doing brand audits, analysis, and everything's going swimmingly. They asked us for a price, which we gave them, they were quite happy with. Then the CEO got involved to sign it off, and he said what they wanted was the cost of a complete buyout of all the IP for all applications in perpetuity, which would include film, TV, and every other application you could think of. Now, if you imagine how much money is spent on just one advert, for instance, that runs nationally in America or Europe, and then you go, right, you want to buy the rights for that in perpetuity. Even if you're giving a massive discount on kind of rack rates, it's a frightening amount of money. And we argue to them that they should not try and buy all the rights forever and just buy stuff as they went along, as they needed it, and we'll give them a reasonable price and establish a relationship with that company. And they wouldn't have it, because they're so paranoid about not having their rights ownership. And I think this is a critical point. It's been a stumbling point for when we've been dealing with people. They don't understand the market for IP acquisition. They don't understand it. And we can have all the theorization about metrics and effectiveness, but unless the clients understand the value of it, even though they don't apply the same rigor to visual branding, it seems to me, or advertising budgets, then we are fighting a losing battle. So I think the problem is one of perception. And so, as I've put here, they usually end up with little budget and even less forethought, and usually end up with bing bang bong for like $5,000. Now, how many people have been in this boat? I know I have. But I'm not doing it anymore, because I think we need to value what we do a bit higher than that. A lot higher than that. Because what they need to do is to understand the overall overarching value of owning the IP of what they're spending money on, instead of just buying, you know, Coldplay's latest track or something. Bastards. Wish I was Coldplay. In any case, the more positive aspect is sound branding is a vital and powerful tool. And you know, I would argue that in the current state of play is how do we give something back to people and appear to be generous, you know, to bigger audiences. And maybe it shouldn't just be B2B all the time that we're thinking about. It should be the general public, because then business will follow, because they want that audience. Right? So let's think bigger. You know, 5 senses branding, everybody talks about it. A lot of marketing companies and advertising companies. It's a new buzzword. You know, like together with immersive. How many people actually do it? Very, very few. And I will show you a couple of examples of things that we've done with all the sensors involved. And I'd also say it's not just about the touch points digitally and, you know, on brand packaging or, you know, the sound of products. It's also about events and how we brand actual spaces in the future in urban environments. So this is our company Sonic ID, and I'm sure it's very similar to a lot of people who have companies here. I'm just going to zip through this because I think you all know it anyway, but the idea is brand identity and Sonic identity has got many, many, many different touch points, increasing number of touch points with business and the public, and they need organising. It's as simple as that. If you were starting a company, or you've got an existing company you want to rebrand, you're not going to say to the visual branding team, use whatever font you want. You know, it doesn't matter. Colours don't matter either. You can have them any size you want. But this is essentially what big companies, what medium-sized companies are saying about sound. They simply do not understand the value of an integrated approach towards sound organisation. So like many other companies, we're endorsing the idea of an organised identity system that can be organised into, creating clarity from clutter, essentially, with an asset management system. And every time you pay for a piece of specifically bespoke composed music or sound, it adds to your brand value. That's the key point. As I've mentioned before, sensory branding is the next frontier. With Sonic ID, we use the power of music and sound to position brands, improve product experiences, and enliven physical environments, and try and engage the public, or if it's a trade show, business to business. Now, this I have to thank. Is Noel here? Noel France.
Hi.
Hey, there you are. Noel's partner in Sonic ID. And this is his slide. The intentional use of music, sound and voice and silence to foster a connection between people and organisations. That's our definition of a sonic identity. Intentional is the important word there. So we do sonic planning, sonic identity systems, sonic experiences. I'm zipping through this, it's a boring bit, right? And we have just as rigorous an approach as any visual branding agency. It's an iterative process consisting of discovery, brand audit, for instance, planning, and we create stuff, and there's a feedback loop. We deliver iterations and so on and so forth, as you're all familiar with. And we can justify the work we do, we can do all the metrics on it, we can give any company the justification they need for using our work. Plus, the added USP is that we, as an agency, actually create the stuff ourselves. We're not just doing the research. We are actually, you can pick up a phone and you can talk to us and say, I don't like bing bong bang, I want bang bong bing. Or something a little more complex than that. But this is our USP, if you like, in this marketplace. We are the creators as well as we understand the marketplace. I'll zip through this. We do mood boards, of course, compliance, blah, blah, blah. Right, future of sonic branding. Now, this is the interesting bit, I think, is about interventions in the real world in physical space, which maybe, hopefully, you'll take away a few kind of ideas from this for future work, or proposals that you could give to clients. Our 3D sound company is called Illustrious. It's me on the left, and that's Vince, who looks a bit like a gangster, I know, but anyway, he sold just as many records as I have, which is quite good. So if you add those together, it all looks very impressive. Erasure and the Yazoo, you know these guys. So what we offer is a wealth of experience as producers, collaborators, composers. I'm not pitching for work from any of you because you're all in the same boat. You're trying to pitch for work too. But what we do is we create three-dimensional living sound environments which articulate ideas to an audience in an emotionally engaging and memorable way. And I've underlined emotionally engaging because I think that's the key point about sound branding, which is forgotten oftentimes. We live in a very visually driven culture, and I think it's much easier to engage the emotions with sound and smell and the other senses than it is visually. And we often collaborate with other practitioners who use different sensory technologies, so it's often driven by sensors or 3D or webcams or whatever. We don't necessarily have to just have it as a standalone product. We often use it as a means of creating a kind of altered reality. And without going into the big list, but we do a lot of stuff for Large-scale public events. I'll show you a few examples in a second. Architectural collaborations are a big one for us because I think the future of architecture is very much about an experiential acknowledgement that it's not just about the latest kind of glass or the latest kind of concrete or the latest shape that you can come up with, and it's not just about creating bigger monstrosities. It's about how you feel when you're in a building or around a building. We do a lot of work for museums and exhibitions and fine art collaborations because we believe that the creative drive is something that should drive commercial aspects. So I mean, you know, I'm in quite an interesting place because I come from an artistic bent, but I'm also engaged with the commercial world. And I think if more of us were kind of on that cusp, I think it makes the world a more interesting place. Commercial and retail is a very exciting and interesting one. I believe that the future of retail is theatre. And as people need more of a reason to go to shops rather than buy online, then the theatre is going to have to become more effective. The immersive nature of keeping you in the shop for longer to buy more stuff you don't need is going to be more of an imperative. Maybe you do need it, I don't know. I'm just a cynic. And we've done over 60 of these three-dimensional immersive sound projects all over the world. Some outdoors, some indoors, some huge, some small, since 2001. And we use a technology called 3D Audioscape. If you have a look at the little coloured balls at the end of those kind of triangle things, they symbolise the location of different sound streams in three-dimensional space. So if we install a 3D sound system here, we'd have speakers in the corners of the room at high level and some at ground level, and we'd be able to move sounds around through your body, around your head, etc., at 25 frames a second, up to 16 different sound sources. All a bit technical, I know, but how do we use it? Well, this is the biggest one we've done so far in Mexico City, where this was an art project, but it was 24 hours of content, 12 two-hour pieces by different sound artists based on the sounds of Mexico City. The interesting thing is that this was sponsored by the biggest bank in Mexico, called Banamex, and it cost an absolute arm and leg. But they regarded it as fantastic exposure for them because it played to 1 million people in 10 days in this square. Now, they didn't have big banners going Banamex everywhere, but they did have, you know, branding subtly placed around the place. So this is what the point I'm trying to make is, if you're giving something back artistically, there will be a commercial value perceived in it. It was very successful. On the opening night, there was about 2,000 people turned up in this relatively small gardens, fueled by cocaine and tequila, and that was just me. We couldn't get them home for obvious reasons. There were people in the centre of the square. There was like a troupe of cyclists actually riding around in a circle, going with big smiles on their faces, experiencing the spatiality of the compositions. It was quite interesting. And we restaged this at California State University to show that these experiences are translocatable around the world as well. So if you imagine, I don't know, Banamex didn't want to do it, but if say, Santander or HSBC wanted to have a big immersive environment that was based around some artistic enterprise, Nokia, for instance, have done the Creators Project recently, which has toured around the world. We could easily translocate these experiences to big open spaces anywhere in the world. And so as a branding tool, it's quite an interesting one, I think. We do installations that are less commercially driven, like this one, which is, imagine this tree pulsing with light, like it's breathing. If you turn it upside down, it looks like lungs, and it's the lungs of the city, right? So you have three-dimensional sound, like a giant breathing into space, 100 meters along this park with 3D sound. So you're going, you know, pretty cool. Things like this. We like to do, we're very interested in what does a city mean and how can it be analysed in sound. We've had quite a lot of success with working on this on a project basis, but it seems to appeal to a lot of commercial and sponsorship enterprises. So, for instance, we did Sound Life London. I think that's coming up next. No, it's not. Sorry. Sound Life Workington. So, it's a small town in the northwest, in the middle of nowhere in Britain, which has regenerated its city centre using this as a three-dimensional kind of 21st century bandstand. And it's got 6 speakers in this ring and 6 speakers in the benches below. And within that you can create, we train people in the town to create their own soundscapes. It's engaged with the local community, etc. And again, it'd be quite feasible. This was paid for by funding initiatives from the European Union, but it could quite easily be branded, for instance. And imagine what a great piece of advertising that would be. It's a bit like the lateral thinking involved with the Barclay bikes in London. And then we did Sound Life London, which took a year to prepare. And we engaged community groups. We had the City of Westminster Council. Again, money's money. If there could be a council paying you, it could be it didn't have to be a big commercial enterprise. So as far as I'm concerned, I know you're thinking I'm getting off the point here, but I think, you know, we're all looking to make a living out of sound in connection with different areas, and I think this is just as valid. Their money is as good as anybody else's, right? That's what I think, anyway. We also did a big piece about the city of Sheffield in the Venice Architectural Biennale, where we examining what it means to be in a city, and we created three-dimensional soundscapes. And we believe in the idea of, you know, a thorough, well-researched piece of compositional content combined with a playful approach. I think often works in terms of engaging the public. Everything we do is kind of public-facing. That's why we get employed to do a lot of things, I think, because we have a populist touch. We're working in the past with the University of Virginia to try and get them to create three-dimensional soundscapes to accompany their reconstruction of ancient Rome from 400 AD, which is actually on Google Earth now. You can actually import it as a layer. When you're looking around Rome, you can see how it used to look. It's bloody amazing, frankly. We're still trying to get funding for that. And we're also still in negotiations with the City of Rome Council to recreate the sound of ancient Rome actually in the Colosseum itself in Rome. This is a classic one where we do need a big sponsor to make it happen, because it's 200 or 300 quite big PA speakers that we need to install in the space. But can you imagine the sound of 50,000 people from a period of time? It's like time travel, right? It's like the Sonny Lumiere show without the Lumiere bit. And I'll zip through these, but Red Bull Music Academy, we did a big DJ sound clash in 3D sound in the Undercroft at the Royal Albert Hall between two big DJ teams, Walk Records and Ninja Tunes, where they were throwing giant sound objects at each other, and that was pretty cool. And we're going to do a 24-hour total immersion experience at the BFI IMAX next year, hopefully with Radiohead. And their fantastic immersive three-dimensional lighting system, which will connect to our 3D sound. So, onto a little bit more, back onto the subject. In Paris, a couple of years ago, we did a 5 Senses branding experience to launch a perfume. Now, perfume is quite an interesting one, because of all the kind of companies that A, have got loads of money, B, are involved with the sensory world, I suppose, perfume houses are amongst the best. They get 5 Senses branding completely. So it was smell, it was generative video and responsive video. It was three-dimensional sound. We kind of created the new perfume was called Tokyo. So we, together with Scrappy Consulting, who are our branding partners, created for Kenzo a kind of reconstruction in a blank space of a kind of Blade Runner environment. It was pretty spectacular. And of course, this was actually only for a press launch. And it was, these people are the opinion formers who enable this particular perfume to become so successful. And the word of it proliferate throughout the world. So this is very valuable stuff to them. Likewise, we work with the world's most expensive diamond company in America, in Boston, called Hearts on Fire. And we created an environment in their shops in sound, which is very futuristic, kind of Japanese-looking kind of franchises in shopping malls. And they wanted to make people dwell longer in the space, so we created this magical sound environment in 3 dimensions where we had twinkling sounds around and slight sounds of kind of semi-sexual breathing of, you know, it's like the guys might get a little bit aroused and go, hold on, if I spend a lot of money on this ring,
It works.
terribly cynical, I know, but it was a beautiful piece we created. So it was quite magical in a kind of serious, kind of adulty way.
Did it include music or just...
Yeah, it was like we composed a special suite of music for it. It's pretty cool, actually.
Can we hear it?
I haven't got it on me at the moment, unfortunately. Oh, what a pity, I should have brought it. I didn't think about it. Yeah. A lot of twinkling and kind of sighing. I could recreate it. And we get weird things like, you know, we've been approached by a couple of companies to look at how, you know, the problems associated with electric cars, which are well documented. They don't make any noise at low speed, and people are getting run over, and blah, 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 blah. We've done a bit of research on this and helped them out with it, and the conclusion I've come to is I favour the Jetsons approach. It's some of they all sound like space cars, but that's probably because I'm a kind of science fiction type guy. I quite like the idea of New York of the future, where they're all going wee, woo. But on a more serious point, you can link the sound of actual, you know, famous car engines and make them sound like they're changing through the gears, for instance, even though it's an automatic, depending on the speed of the wheels. So you have a button you can press. You can be a Ferrari or a Maserati, or you can be a Skoda. You know, depending on what your mood is that day. Or silent. You switch it off, of course. That's another option. So this is constantly evolving now. The next generation of electric cars will, I think, it's going to be mandatory in the US, and it's pretty soon to be mandatory in the EU as well. Yeah. Finally, I'm on message for this conference. Sorry, I've got nothing else to offer on the mobile front apart from this, but we were asked by Ogilvy to create a series of ringtones for young people to communicate with each other that nobody in this room could hear, including me.
The frequency.
Yeah, because it's very high frequency. And I tested it on my 12-year-old son and my 14-year-old daughter. I programmed a kind of bell sound that played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, you know, just in the audible frequency, and then moved it up, put it on a phone, it was a Nokia phone, hid it behind her back, asked them to come and listen to it in my studio. Didn't even tell them what they were there for, and they said, oh, who's playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? And it was completely inaudible to myself, my assistant, and a work experience guy who was 17. I mean, totally inaudible. I mean, not even little tiny hint of it, and it was really loud to them. So just to let you know that it's not because we've all been listening to music too loud. We all are hearing, everybody in this room can't hear anything above 16K. I can't hear anything above about 14K actually. And but the exciting thing was, I'll show you a little video actually. That's the best. Can you play that to us? I don't have more.
Fanta believe teens should have the right to play. This idea was inspired by the controversial ultrasonic alarms used to disperse teenage groups. These play high-pitched sounds which only young people can hear. When you get older, you can't hear these sounds anymore, as your hearing naturally gets worse.
Morning first, our main story for you this morning. The sonic device known as the mosquito, used to stop teenagers gathering near public places, should be banned. That's according to England's Children's Commissioner.
The mosquito, as it's called, emits a high-pitched noise which manufacturers claim can only be heard by those under 25. Critics say it's an ineffective way of tackling antisocial behaviour and that it demonises young people.
We turned this technology on its head. The mobile application we invented, the Fanta Stealth sound system, enables the same teenagers to communicate between themselves using these high-pitched frequencies which adults cannot hear.
It's a scientific fact that as you get older, your hearing gets worse. You can't hear high-pitched frequencies anymore. This is a teenager. His hearing is perfect. He can hear the high-pitched frequencies in the Fanta Stealth sound system, which means he can communicate with friends in secret. And I can't hear a thing.
The application has already generated considerable media interest. Directions to the website is on over 50 million packs in Great Britain. The viral film has been seeded to over 4 million teenagers across Europe.
So what is the Stealth sound system? The Stealth sound system uses sound waves that most adults can't hear. Most adult ears are damaged due to overexposure to loud things such as domestic rows and popular music. To make it work, go to the WAP site and download it straight to your mobile phone. Then adjust the volume on your phone. Keep doing this until you can hear it, but older people can't. By using the uncool sound, you can say something is uncool. Or use the cool sound if you think something is cool. The warning sound should only be used in serious circumstances. Like if a huge flaming meteorite is seconds from the Earth. And finally, there's the wolf whistle sound. The wolf whistle is an ancient and very effective form of communication which has been around since the 1970s. Use it to tell your best mate you fancy his mother.
Anyway, you get the idea. It's a subversive tool for kids, but it was actually downloaded by about 10 or 20 million. It's ridiculous. I don't know. Anyway, we didn't get paid enough for it. Also, there was a launch for Beldopium last year with Yves Saint Laurent, where we created an amazing 5 sensors immersive environment with high definition projection and smell installations, rotating platform, etc., and 3-dimensional sound. So that's a real 5 sensors installation, right? I'm going to rush through the rest now. There's so much to go through. Oh yeah, healthcare. Very interesting. This was a brand new hospital built in Newcastle in England. They spent a fortune on it, right in the city centre. They built what is essentially a shopping mall in the centre of 2 old buildings to try and make it into a social space. They built it. Nobody wanted to go there because it felt terrible. So we got brought on board as consultants to make it into a more friendly environment. So we created a kind of jukebox of 3-dimensional sound environments ranging from rainforest through to being at the seaside, through to you name it. Very calming environments, gentle abstract sounds. Even publishers have employed us to create a 3-dimensional soundscape to accompany their book, which is about surfing. This book, which won many awards. Tim Winton is an Australian guy, Australian writer, and the book was about surfing. And so we created a 3-dimensional soundscape under Hungerford Bridge in London, and it sold lots of books. We're working on the idea of sonic portraiture with the National Portrait Gallery in London, which I think is a very interesting development. We just did the 3D soundscape for the Beatles experience at the New Museum of Liverpool, in Liverpool. You may have heard of Michael Clarke, the choreographer. We just worked in the Tate Modern Turbine Hall with him with 3-dimensional sound to try and create a more immersive environment in a very difficult sonic situation. And with the National Portrait Gallery, we installed a series of 4 3-dimensional soundscapes and a night of special performances to create what artists would interpret what a particular portrait or a gallery would inspire them to create new compositions in three-dimensional sound. And this was a massive success. It's not the first time something like this has been done. A friend of mine called Charlie Morrow, who lives in New York, or used to live in New York till recently, has been doing this sort of thing in New York for quite a few years. I was inspired by him on this one. And next year we're doing Future of the Senses at Sydney Opera House at a festival called Vivid, where we're trying to encourage people to consider the senses as a very important part of artistic enterprise, but not only artistic, a way of creating commercially viable future environments that people might want to sponsor. And this is possibly the most interesting thing of all. Last week we did this installation, a huge three-dimensional sound installation on this very popular street in Brighton, which this particular stretch of this street by the waterfront in Brighton in England, by the way, has, I think, 5 nightclubs and a total capacity of about 15,000 in all the nightclubs. And on a weekend, it's full of stag and hen parties who come out onto the street and fight, basically, and argue. And there are, you know, lots of police vans with dogs trying to arrest people, and it's chaos. So I did a research trip like a month ago, and we were asked by an organisation called the Noise Abatement Society, believe it or not, who now are looking into positive soundscaping for urban environments, because the cities are not going to get less crowded, they're going to get more crowded. How can we acknowledge the fact that it's a very noisy environment and maybe modulate that experience for the better to make all our lives more pleasant? Can these spaces be branded? So we created a 6-hour soundscape. It was a big success. Academics are going to be touring around the world giving papers on it next year. If we can create a new tool for urban planners and architects to incorporate sound into physical space in cities around the world and have it as a kind of best practice thing, we are really looking at a whole new swathe of work for a lot of people.
What kind of sound?
What kind of sounds? Well, because it was a kind of test bed, really. So it was a lot of things we'd done previously, but we composed some new stuff. Generally, kind of it ranged from kind of seascapes through to natural environments, through to some of the compositional kind of ambient music that we created. But also, we did things like we looked at the top 10 popular club tracks, took them and slowed them down by 50% whilst keeping them at the same speed, at the same pitch. So wondering whether people would recognise them or not and whether it would calm them down. And it just happened to be Halloween night, so it was fancy dress night as well, so it was really crazy shit, believe me. There was gangs of boys dressed as skeletons and stuff, and they're all kind of body popping in some kind of slow jam manner to Beyonce's Countdown at half speed. It was really worked, and it kind of distracted them from fighting each other and arguing. Plus there was a track called Being Boiled, which I composed in 1978, which I've done a new version of, which we actually took the tempo map of it and slowed it down throughout the track until the tempo kind of fell off a cliff at the end and stopped. And while there were probably 2,000 or 3,000 people queuing up to get into these nightclubs, most of them were actually dancing with it as it was slowing down, and it was kind of, if you like, I suppose you could argue, probably slowing down their heart rates, etc. And they all seemed to work. Anyway, University of Sussex had people on site filming it live and transmitting it to a theatre. There was behavioural analysts looking at it and analysing people's kind of body language while all this was going on, and the findings are coming out shortly. And this could be a real big break for, not just for us, but for sound in general in urban environments. And we just did the world's first rock gig in 3D a couple of weeks ago, which was really something, actually, in the Roundhouse. I'm not going to go through all this because I'm running out of time. But just to conclude, changing our acoustic ecology and how brands can fit, I think is an important one. We need to think a bit more laterally and not just go after the same money that everybody else is going after. Enhancing the urban experience. I mean, one idea we've had for a while is giving a building a sonic signature that actually kind of is an aura that surrounds a building. That's quite an interesting concept. Nobody's actually implemented that yet, but we're still working on it. Cityscaping, communal gaming experiences. There's some interest in the games community about creating, if you like, flash mob type gaming experiences, which then you can see on a giant screen in big public spaces, because we all need communal experience. People are willing to pay for that shit. If it's free, it's even better. But it's a way for a brand to expose themselves, possibly. Retailers theatre, theatrical applications, theme parks is an obvious one. Immersive trade events, outdoor and indoor, communal experiences, and projects with virtual worlds. That's another one. We've done stuff with Second Life, and collaborations with digital, visual and interactive technologies, interfaces and devices. So it's not just about the bottom line, which you're going to be hearing about the rest of the day. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
I think I did not promise you too much. This was really a run through, plenty of great things you did, plenty of options that are ahead of us that we all can profit from. And that's the idea also of the Audio Branding Congress, really get the business going, grow the market. We're also, most of you guys are competitors, but my idea of Audio Branding Congress is cooperation, in the sense we make the market grow and then everybody has plenty of room doing projects. And you have shown us so many great pieces. It's really wonderful. Thank you, Martyn, for that presentation. And Martyn, I thought you had one really good thought at the beginning, which I want to bring back again. And that's the point. Visually, we have corporate design manuals 250 pages thick.
Yes.
And when it comes to sound, suddenly everything's possible. This is a good point where I think at least some of the executives might make a click. You might hear the click sound. Why are we hyper-critical with visual stuff, where I sometimes think it's overdone? A little less would be handy. Have it a 20-page rule manual kind of thing. And in sound, you do just what you feel like. In some stores, even the employees can bring their CDs still today.
Yes, yes, yes. I would argue that the 20th century was about the visual because of film and TV. And I think the 21st century is moving into the sensory age.
Yes. And you showed us wonderful examples because, I mean, we are audio here, but we have to think of all 5 senses. Exactly. We have to convince guys visual is a must, but if you want to differentiate, use the other senses, and sound is the strongest probably after vision. And so this is, but don't stop there, go into smell, go into haptics, and if you go into food or at least visualize food, you can also do it indirectly. Yeah, there are many options.
Yeah, I also think we've got to stop being so apologetic about being in a kind of small part of the field. It's almost, we're always the Cinderella, right? Well, we shouldn't be thinking that way. We've got to keep positive.
Okay.
How to people.
Thank you very much, Martyn. Thank you, thank you, thank you.